I'm doing this in OBS, so hooray. Okay. Welcome, everybody, to the first round the table about actual plays. Our topic today is pacing and editing. So, helping me to organize this was Jeff from the Big Campaign Podcast.
Hello.
So, Jeff, thank you for this. You helped bring in a lot of good talent today, which we appreciate. And let's just jump in, meet everybody, then get into questions. So, Jeff, why don't you do name, pronouns, and podcast?
I'm Jeff, he, him, and I'm the GM of the Big Campaign Stories podcast.
Okay, Riley.
I'm Riley, they, them, any pronouns, and my podcast is Friend and Foe Adventure Co.
Okay, Psycho.
I am Psycho. I am the DM of the Clash of Crits podcast. Oh, sorry. And I am he, him.
Okay, Ari.
Hello, my name is Ariana or Ari, and I use she, her pronouns, and I am the DM, well, one of the DMs, editor, and a lot of other things for Tales of Three podcast by Rainbow Dice Club.
Okay, and Neil.
Hey folks, my name is Neil. My pronouns are he, him. I am the creator of TTRPG called Fayearth and also the GM of our weekly actual play.
Okay. So the first question I've got for all of you is a pretty basic one. It's kind of a two-part one, so we'll just go through with the first question, then ask the second part. What program or programs do you use for editing? So Jeff.
I use Audacity.
Okay. Riley.
I use Logic Pro X and then Isotope kind of plugins and a standalone thing.
Okay. Psycho.
I use Adobe Audition.
Ari.
We record in Riverside, and I edit with Adobe Audition.
Okay. And Neil.
I use a free to download, fairly basic, very basic, but also means easy to use, editing software called OSIN Audio.
Okay. And I can actually answer this one too. When I edit our Twitch stream for a non-actual play project, I use Adobe Premiere Pro. Okay. So how do you like the technology that you've been using? Any like on a scale of 1 to 10? Anybody just jump in?
Yeah, so far, I mean, as far as Audacity goes, I've had to teach myself how to edit, so I found it wasn't too hard to pick up, and it has a lot of plugins, a lot of good things for a free program. I'd give it a 7 out of 10.
Okay. Riley?
Yeah, I used to use GarageBand, and so Logic Pro X is like the upgraded version of that. So it felt really natural to jump to that. There was definitely a learning curve because there was like new things to it, but I really love it. I think it's really nice. If you're familiar with GarageBand at all, then it's not a hard thing to jump to.
Okay, Psycho?
Yeah, I'd probably give my similar to Jeff. I self-taught pretty much everything I've done for it, and it's really the only one I've really worked with, so I don't have a lot to go off of when it comes to other ones, but I would give it a 7 out of 10 as well.
Okay, Ari.
Pretty much same answer. Self-taught, not very good at learning computer things. That's me. So it was a learning curve to kind of self-teach myself how to edit. And it's the only program that I use so far is Adobe Audition, so I definitely don't have anything to compare it to, but I'm really happy with it, and I've learned a lot of tricks kind of on my own, like by accident, in the 2 years now that I've been editing.
Okay. And Neil.
So my editing is very bloody minimal, to be honest with you. I don't do sound effects or any of that kind of stuff. It's usually just fixing audio levels of the different speakers. That's about as much, and cropping out the random crap that we're saying at the start. before we technically go live. So my software that I use, Ocean Audio, is perfect for that because it is so very simple. And there's a couple of really good YouTube tutorials for idiots like me. So like I'm quite happy with it. I'd happily give it like an 8, 8.5 out of 10. But I do know that if I wanted to be doing something more complicated and more in depth, I would probably have to move to some other form of software.
Okay.
I'm
So,
realizing I didn't give a number. uh you all gave numbers and I feel left out, but I feel like as you guys were talking too, I realized like, oh, you know what, I learned GarageBand and Logic Pro because of music originally, and for podcast editing I think it's fine, but it's definitely designed for music, and I wish that they would start to cater more to podcasting. So like if you are looking to start on something, I would say this is like a 6 out of 10. um it's great if you're familiar with GarageBand, but you definitely have to tweak things to make it work better for podcasting.
okay. Well, what I'm hearing mostly is that people think that their stuff is like media is like average to good. So that's good. That that people are making low cost programs, hopefully low cost, that you are good for the things that you're using them for. So let's jump on. So from here on out, we're not going to do. It'll be a little more free form. People just jump in if you've got something to say, and I'll call on people if it sounds like they've got something they want to put in. So anyway, what is your favorite and least favorite part about editing?
I could start immediately because it's something I always talk about. Is I am someone who likes to multitask. Someone who multitask. I always try to utilize my time as a person. So like the my biggest problem with editing is the fact that that's not something you could really multitask, because you have to have your focus on it, because if you don't focus on it, you'll mess up, you'll miss something. And I feel so weird because I'm always someone that's like watching, reading something, or maybe listening to something at the same time. I'm literally outside of editing, I'm almost always multitasking in some kind of way. So it is just a hard like transition that I have to do when I have to like get in the zone of getting ready to edit because of that.
Yeah, I understand.
Bro,
I'm the
same.
same way. Yeah, absolutely.
Very relatable.
Yeah,
I
like last. Oh, go ahead.
No, you can go first. Go ahead.
No, I insist.
Oh, okay, thanks. So my favorite thing about editing is that I have come to kind of start to look at it as like putting together the pieces of a puzzle. Um, we do a lot of editing in the story that we tell, and it's really fun for me to kind of piece together conversations, and figure out what needs to stay, what can go into the blooper reel, and things like that. Um, and I do kind of hyper focus on it, but I also am a person who gets really like anxiety in their body when they sit still for too long. And so sometimes I'll have the mindset of like, okay, today's editing day, and I'll be doing 20 minutes, and I'm like, I can't do this. And I have to just get up and I have to go do a task. So what I started doing is I'll do an hour and then I stop for an hour and I go back and forth and I get a lot of chores done around the house. So I've made it productive the best I could.
So it sounds like we might have a little bit of neurospice going on in here. What do we think about
A
that?
smidge, just a smidge.
Sounds about right.
It's funny because so I have ADHD, and for me, if I don't take my meds, then I hyper focus on it. And so like there's times that I intentionally don't take my ADHD meds because I know that I can sit down and start editing and like time has no meaning, right? Like all of a sudden there's like 4 or 5 hours have gone by and I'm still working on this. The downside is that I'm maybe a little less effective at some of my editing, or I'll like focus on being like, oh, here's this background noise. I hate that noise. Let me try and figure out the way to do it, which is fun to learn, but it also like turned something that could have been, like a 4 hour editing session into like a 5 hour editing session. So, but I love the same reasons, like putting together the story, piecing things together. When people get to hear the finished product, but we have to hear it like we experience it live. There's all these like awkward pauses, rolling, clarifying
Yeah.
questions, and we edit so much of that out that the listeners feel like, whoa, these guys are pros. All these people that they
We're
just like,
not.
yeah, we're not. Like, we
I mean,
are
I'm not. I won't
awkward.
speak for anyone else, but
Yeah. We are so awkward. We are so weird. There's so many questions that come up like, what's happening again? Where am I? What's around me? And then it's just like, okay, now pretend like you got it and we'll clean it up in the edit. Like it's like a puzzle that's so fun to put together.
Yeah.
But it's also very time consuming.
Nothing like Googling for 10 minutes of can your player really do something like this? Is this a viable thing? And then you're looking at the wavelengths and you just gotta be like, okay. We were talking about this here, and then you finally find the spot and then you cut it down. And I did forget to say what my favorite part is, and similar to them, it is knowing what it comes from to what you make it. On those final products, it sounds.
yeah.
Because it sounds so streamlined, and even when there's certain points where some of us might have stuttered or things like that, you're able to edit and make it sound like just one cohesive sentence, like there wasn't any stuttering or anything in between, and it's just honestly quite impressive, just that technology is able to do that in general, and it gives me a lot of respect for the people who do this kind of stuff for jobs, for TV and things like that. I'm like, man, this is nuts.
Yeah. But in a way, go ahead.
Just gonna say for myself, the thing I do love about editing is the fact that the finished product is so much cleaner, because when I'm editing for my podcast, it's just the audio of the video file from my live streams on Twitch, so that is what I'm editing, and I don't put in sound effects and stuff because I don't have the time. I'm using very, very simple free software. So technically I could, and I have done so in the past, but it's just not worth the effort. And also, because that wasn't in the live stream, I don't want to add it after the fact. But it is great to be able to cut out that little bit of whatever background noise that suddenly popped up, and just make everything cleaner. And the thing that I dislike most of all about editing, apart from what we've all said about how time consuming it is, especially if you're somebody like me who is a perfectionist and will spend 45 minutes looking for YouTube tutorials on how to do one very specific thing for what is ultimately 10 seconds of audio. There's also the fact that a lot of people say they hate the sound of their own voice. When I first started recording, obviously I didn't like it, but I got over it quickly. I still don't like the sound of my own voice, but it's not an issue. But what I've really grew to hate was realizing just how many times I personally in my streams say or or okay. I was like, and cutting, I actually will spend an hour cutting all of them out just so I don't have to listen to them in the playback.
Yeah. So I would say the majority of my editing is cutting out filler words as well. It's crazy. Just why?
when you guys did your editing, did you realize something about yourself that you didn't realize in general, other than filler words? I found out when I started editing that I talk fast. My entire life, no one ever told me I talk fast. My entire life, and then I found out while I was editing that I'm talking kind of fast. Maybe that's why I have to tell my story multiple times to my friends. But no one's just ever said anything to me, so I never knew. And now I'm super conscious about it when I'm talking now and everything like that, trying to make sure that I'm not just zipping away.
I've learned to slow down. I'm a fast talker as well, and I used to do recaps, and I would go my two castmates, Dusty and Waver, would be like, "Hey, stop it! Take a breath. You cannot zoom through a recap that quickly." And I'm like, "I'm just talking normally." So yeah, I've become super aware of it.
Oh man, it can make you a little self-conscious, huh? Yeah.
Absolutely. I think for me, I've noticed my cadence. That was the hardest thing, and I have improved since then. I know I have, because when you hate something that much, like because it adds time editing, right? So when I take a pause in the middle of a sentence, that means that I need to cut that like weird, awkward 5-second pause. Like I don't know how long it is. It changes, but like when you hate something that much and I have control over it, I want to change it, right? So that's one thing that I think has improved. And I think that I talk slow sometimes, but then when we release an episode and it's doing like in our outro, I always speed through the outro because I think that I talk slow, right? I'm just like, oh, like I don't want people to be stuck listening to just me say like, hey, here's where our stuff is, blah 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 blah. Thanks for listening, blah 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 blah. Like, and I've had people comment, be like, whoa, you really rush through that outro, don't you? And I'm like,
Aw.
yeah, because it's just me. You don't want to hear me. I
I
don't
will
like me. You guys
wanna-
can't.
I want to say one thing because I know that maybe to people listening it might be like, oh, they're all being really hard on themselves. A positive a thing that I've also learned in all this and learning about the way that I speak and sound and all the weird noises I make when I'm talking into a microphone, I've also learned to let things go and accept certain things as they are, and it's still a process for sure, but it has become something where it's like you can easily spend 45 minutes trying to fix something that literally no one else is going to notice except for you. No one else is going to notice it. So I try to be mindful of that too when I get hyper focused on something and I'm like, I'm the only person who's worried about this. Just let it go. Move on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I let's see here. Sorry, I had to mute
Jeff
myself.
taught me that.
I was exploding.
Yeah, thank you for coming today, Jeff, despite your your
Oh,
nose issues.
yeah, it was fine all week, but we just have a cold day here in Seattle, so all the pollen's just
That
kind of
sounds nice.
free flowing. And I'm just gonna die. Sorry. Um, I think my favorite part about editing really comes down to the puzzle aspect of it. Like I feel like I'm solving a riddle with audio when I put it together and I make the story happen, and it's very fun to send that out and have other people listen to it. Um, I think my least favorite part really is just the beginning of it, right? Like when you're looking at, oh my God, 2 hours of people talking, and I've already talked this. I'm the one talking right now. Jeepers me. And but once you get into it, it's fine, right? Like it's like any chore or any kind of thing. It's not actually bad. You just mentally get up in your brain and think about like, I can't believe I can do this for the next 5 hours.
Yeah.
But it has been funny. I have now noticed that I definitely was one of those kids who probably said a lot and was told by somebody, don't say So I just made up new filler words because when I'm editing the podcast, I'm like, why am I saying that? I'm like, I know why I'm saying that because I want to say but somebody told me at one point, don't do it. And now I just make up weird new fun words. I'm like, well, relatively,
That's
and then
awesome.
new word entirely, new sentence starts. I'm like, just stop it.
Yeah.
And then you notice those words while you're editing and you're because mine there's a good chunk of the podcast where you start hearing me say apparently a lot. And I realized that was my new filler word for a while. And I was like, I would rather have or with how much I'm saying apparently. Drives me crazy.
That's funny, said because I do think I remember an episode of your podcast where I think you said it like 3 times.
Yes.
In like 2 sentences, and I was like, "There's no way you could fit that many apparentlys into 2 sentences."
No.
Like at this point, it needs to be apparent. It's not apparently anymore.
Yeah, I think that I tend to do things like preface my sentences with things like "well" and "okay then" and things like this. Because if you can't, if you're trying to get your thoughts together and you don't want to say so you're just putting in meaningless filler words to stay there. It's a bad habit. It's a tick, verbal tick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not that hard to edit out, but it's not the most fun thing. Although I'm sure that every single one of us that edits can recognize an waveform of their own voice at least, if not all your cast.
Yeah.
Yes. All
Well,
of
the
my characters.
character that I play. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, no, go ahead. Ari. That was it.
I
I
was
was
just
just
gonna say the character that I play is a very nervous person who uses a lot, so I have to carefully curate how many ums go into her speech pattern, because sometimes I overdo it, and I'm like, nope, that's too many. We need to cut one or two here. So yeah.
Have you guys ever I just did it.
Yeah, right. I know now I'm hyper focused on it.
No, I know. I'm like, how many times did I just say
So, have you ever used that, like accidentally do it, but then like kind of leaned into it? I remember I would do it. I remember certain specific points I would do it, and then I would just play into it that like the character's nervous or stuttering,
Mm-hmm.
just it kind of thing, like where like I was like conscious of myself doing it, and so then I just had it then almost made it a part of their character instead, just to kind of like cover my ass, you know.
It's literally my character
Yeah.
that I play. She's an ummer, and I just lean into it.
Yeah.
Neil, with doing live shows, right? You record it live and everything, right? So when you're not editing it, do you guys discourage us or ums, or do you talk about that off air, or pay any attention to it at all?
To be honest, the only thing that I say to my players is please stop talking over each other.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
That's the hardest thing, though, isn't it? I mean,
Uh,
everyone's got something they want to say just right now, or you know.
yeah.
But-
So
It's so funny with that one too, because like I took improv classes before to kind of prep for specifically for our podcast. And one of the things they teach you is that when somebody starts to interrupt you, the person who's talking needs to stop because they're interrupting you for a reason. If you trust your cast enough, right? You know they're gonna come in with a joke or something relevant that'll move things forward. But that's like a teaching thing that we've had to go through. And there was a time where I emphasized that maybe too hard, and then all of a sudden nobody was talking, and I was like, "Shit,
Oh.
I done messed that up."
That's
It's
It
all
is-
a learning process.
it is
Yeah.
interesting you say that though, because like, so I've been live streaming on Twitch for a year and a half. But this is technically the second campaign of Fey Earth. And my first one I ran for 5 years, although that 5 years did include COVID and a baby, so there was a bit of a break in that. But when we played from first to 20th level, and I mean actually
Nice.
played at 20th level. My players got to 20th
Very
level, and then we had the final fight against the final BBEG. It wasn't the usual bullshit of, oh, you beat everybody, get well done, you're at 20th level, but you never get to play well, you never get to do the cool shit. You know, they were 20th level, trying to stop an ancient dark fey demigod from being released from their chains. Okay. But when we got to about, I think, 14th or 15th level in that campaign, I started recording it. Now we were playing around my table at home. So that we were recording at it, and then I would edit that audio and upload it as a podcast series. So then when we started campaign 2, the first 2-3 months was the same podcast, but then we started live streaming on Twitch. But suffice it to say, I would feel at this point I have a lot of bloody experience running actual plays, you know, that are being shared with the masses. And the one thing that I will say, and you do see, and this is not talking about editing, but talking about what we're saying about players and the likes and conversation and flow conversation, we all know of the Matt Mercer effect, of course, and these 19-year-old Gen Zs who get into D&D because they've watched Critical Role and them and their buddies start playing, and then they start bitching and moaning because why is my game not like Critical Role? Why is my GM not like Mercer? No one ever says, why are you the player not like Liam O'Brien or Travis Willingham, you know, or Marisha Ray, which is the bigger reason for why your game is not like Critical Role, not your GM. It's you, the player. And it is something that I have noticed when I watch actual plays. I don't watch them as much as I used to, but I do still a little bit. The difference that you get in a show when the cast are professionally trained, they went to university and studied drama, they studied acting, they studied theater, or they did it as a hobby, they did improv classes and the likes, versus the bunch of nerds who decided we're going to start recording the shit we do on our kitchen table. It's just, you know, they're worlds apart. They are, and you see that in the people who have the actual formal training in improv or in theater where they're using the improv tools correctly, you know, where they are actually playing off each other's beats in a way that the nerds who decided to record at their table don't do. And it's not their fault. They had not formally trained in this. But then when it gets to you as the editor, it's like, oh my God, this is a dream. This is amazing. There is so little work for me to do compared to the amateurs producing content that we're trying to make look professional, you know? And I do feel that it is something that is just not at all considered by the wider community. Like I saw this. Oh, this is terrible. I'm sorry. Is a guy I follow on TikTok, and I can't remember his name. I'll try and find it on my socials. But his background is theater. He works in theater. He's from the United States, and he works in theater. And he put up a TikTok video recently. People were commenting on like what's ruining TTRPGs and all that, and someone talked about yes and, you know, which is your classic improv tool, and people saying yes and has ruined TTRPGs. And he put up a really great video in which he said the problem isn't that yes and is ruining TTRPGs. The problem is that the people who are using yes and don't understand the yes and rule. The important thing about the yes and rule isn't the yes, it's the and. And that's where everybody messes up, you know? And I just think it comes through so much. You see it so much when you're watching, as I said, like joking about, oh, telling my players not to talk over each other, you know? You don't see players talking over each other when they all have a theater background because they know when to pause, they know when to talk over each other, they know when somebody starts talking over them to be quiet or when to be even more vocal in their response so they don't, you know. And then of course all of that just feeds directly into what you're trying to do as the editor, you know, in so many different ways, which for us trying to do it, oh, it's at Improv GM. That's the chap on TikTok, okay? And he's also on Twitter and Blue Sky and all that. But it's just these little things that people don't discuss, people don't consider, which have such a massive impact on your actual play, whether it's an audio actual play or a Twitch live stream, and then has such an impact on you when you're editing that content afterwards. I think just personally it's something that I hope we start seeing more conversations about in the TTRPG community. Because apart from anything else, for those of us mad bastards who spend so many hours editing this crap, it would make our lives so much easier.
Well, I think that there's also something to be said about like table chemistry, I think, and knowing your players. I think the longer that you play together, the more you learn each other's kind of like nuances. And for us, something that we decided to do was now it depends on the scene. Silly scenes, we are yes and we will, if we cut each other off because it's funny, we're totally okay. We've talked about it and we like that. When we're doing serious scenes, if you could hear the unedited version of the long pauses, because we don't speak until we know that the person is done thinking or saying what they need to say. And for editing, obviously it makes it longer because I have huge chunks of silence that I have to cut through, but in the long run it makes the final piece come together in like a really beautiful way. And I think that for us it's been about like communication with each other, and it's been like being like really honest about what's working and what's not working, but also just learning how we play together and having that chemistry from the get-go.
Let me just
From
say,
Is my experience.
I'm just going to say real quick, of all the podcasts, of all the people here I've listened to, seems like all your crews are really tight. Makes it a lot of fun to listen to.
Yeah.
I would say
Sorry, no, you go ahead.
I was just going to add to the with the editing part where, you know, when you have those dramatic things, sometimes it's easy to be funny quick, but being dramatic quick is very different because it's a lot heavier for yourself. If you really put yourself in that mood. And from an editing standpoint, those long pauses are easier to edit than people talking in between. So like giving people those silences, if you're looking at editing a podcast, right, like allowing those silences is amazing for your cast, for your
Yeah.
crew. And then that, you know, in the edit, it's like that's going to be easy to cut down rather than people being like, oh, you know, like let's bullshit kind of
Right.
between the thinking moments or whatever it is.
Also, if
Yeah.
you. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Mm-mm.
Yeah, I feel like I've kind of got a cheat code. And I've been very lucky because all the nerds sitting at my table I've been friends with for years. So we do know each other's kind of speech patterns of, oh, Marshall's finishing his sentence because he said those two words together.
Yeah.
So we know it's like, all right, we know he's done talking. We know we're free to go. But it was fun explaining to them that we can restart any sentence. It can just be edited out. But hey, if you need time to think, that's awesome. Stop crinkling potato bags while you're thinking. If you can just quietly think, you can take an hour. I don't mind. Just don't make noise. I can edit that away in an instant. A little magic fairy wish, and it's great.
How often do you have people retake lines?
Not very often, honestly. Just John, for some reason, loves to like play with his zipper, and he doesn't think we can hear it. And so
Oh yeah.
he's the one guy where you're like, John, put it down. He's like, what?
You got to get
I
silent
can
stim
hear it.
toys. Get like squishy, you know?
Yeah.
It's funny though, Ari, you were mentioning length, and one thing that really shocked me with campaign 1, which was just pure audio editing of our kitchen table game, was how much the audio was cut when I cut out things like the filler words, you know? Like, it was shocking. I could have nearly 10 minutes less in the final version than in the original audio file. And 90% of those 10 minutes was simply me cutting out filler words. But also, when we talk about those long pauses, the style of play that we have at our game, like, we do have some pretty intense moments, some very high drama moments. There are moments where people are nearly crying. But just because of the way my players are from personality, there tends not to be that much by way of long pauses. But one thing I did feel and was very noticeable of was the fact that it's one thing when you're watching something on TV and there's a long dramatic pause in the dialogue between two characters. You're caught up in that moment. But when you're listening to audio and there's silence is so deafening and overwhelming that a 7-second long pause, when I cut that to 3 seconds in my audio, that 3 seconds is just as impactful to the listener as the 7 seconds were for us at the table. And I do think that's something that I think that's actually something. It's something that when people start doing this, those are the little tricks and secrets that we don't know. And it's not until you've actually been doing it a couple of weeks or a couple of months and you're listening back to what you're doing and you realize, oh shit, I should have cut that, or oh, I should have let that go for longer. And unfortunately, I don't think there is any fun YouTube tutorials or online courses you can, like, that is just pure experience and learning on the job, you know, that there's, as I think we're going to have some really amazing and insightful things in our roundtable to help people, but that is something that none of us can help you with. You're only going to learn it from doing your editing, listening to your audio, listening back to your audio, and yeah.
That was that actually reminds me of a problem I had the first time I edited episodes. I listen to most of my podcasts at a higher speed. Just, it's easier for me, right? Not a problem. But editing for the first time and doing it myself, I played it for one of my players, and they're like, "This is madness, man. What have you done? This is garbled, rapid monkey screaming." I'm like, "What do you mean? It's fine." And they're like, "What if people wanted to listen to this?" I'm like, "Good call. Okay, hold on."
Yeah. Similar to what Jeff was saying earlier, like me and my buddies, we've been friends for a very long time, and we've been playing together for like a decade in general. So we have really good chemistry with each other in general. So it really helps. The only the only caveat to that is that sometimes the chemistry is too much, and then it's just like they're rolling and rolling, and it's great. But like next thing you know, these guys have been doing this bit for 20 minutes, and it's like, hey guys, I love it, but like we gotta move on. Something else has to happen. Something else has to happen. And then another quick caveat to like the zipper thing that Jeff was talking about. Do any of your people ever like when they're trying to be quiet with a certain noise and it's like, dude, I'd rather you just say, hey, can you do this real quick, get the noise over with? Like my players are like sticking their hands in like potato chip bags or like trying to open
Slowly.
up things slowly. It's like just
Do
it takes 1 second to edit that out, and it'll be over with. Instead, now I hear tick, 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 tick through through like 20 seconds, just because you wanted like to open a potato chip bag.
Yeah,
It's really
I
nice
feel
to
that.
talk to other editors.
And I was just thinking, like, it feels like we're going to be bashing ourselves and our players, and we are. That's what this
No
is
way.
going to be.
We love you so much.
We do. We
Also,
love our
I
players.
tell them.
It's funny as well talking about crisps. One observation that I did make was once I started recording our games in my kitchen for our first campaign of the podcast, I banned noisy food. Okay,
Yes.
so no crisps and none of that kind of stuff. So what happened was people were bringing jellies, but something that I very quickly realized was that there's a lot more sugar in jellies, and it's a different type of carbohydrate than the carbohydrates in starchy foods like crisps. So what was happening was my players were getting sugar highs at the table because of all
Oh
of the
my
jelly
goodness.
sweets that we were eating instead of crisps, and it was very much changing the vibe at the table. There were a couple of really chaotic scenes for a couple of weeks when we made the food swap, and then I think their metabolisms got used to the switch of carbs, but it was really funny and very noticeable. And yet again, something I'd never considered would happen.
Did they also
Yeah.
have sugar crashes?
That was happening a bit, but
Mm.
it was funny because there was, I think the sugar crashes were combining with the endorphin crash when your really awesome session is finished and you're like, oh, I have to go home now. I don't want to go home. I want to keep playing. So they were coinciding, you know?
Oh, yeah. I think it drives me crazy. I just don't want any of my players eating at all while we're playing. And then, but if you are eating, then let me know rather than just jumping in because you're supposed to. Be like, sorry, hold on, I'm chewing on something. Because there's been 1 or 2 times where in the moment, I'm so focused on 20 different things, running the session, making sure the recording's going well, all of this stuff, that I don't notice somebody's eating. And then when I go to the edit, I'm just like, oh my gosh, what has happened here? Like, it's infuriating. So like, if you're doing a podcast and you're going to be editing it like that, just tell us that you're eating and then do your line after.
Another note to that, I would say, is like if like your focus, at least because like we record in person. I know for people who record like through like
Lucky.
Discord or things like that. Yeah, it's easier to catch, but sometimes I'm like really focused with like a scene that's going on with maybe one particular player, and then the other two are like whispering to each other, and I don't notice it during the recording, but then I hear it during editing, and I'm like, now I gotta cut this. Now I gotta try to figure out how to like cut this down, whatever, like and like take those parts out. And it's like it's one of those like it's a like how you say you're already paying attention to 20 things. Now I gotta pay attention to 21 things. I'm like, come on, guys, let's
Isn't it?
try to focus.
I think it's wild how, as an editor, or for me at least, my brain is split in 6 different places when we're recording because I have my character, I have sometimes I'm also DMing, and then I have the editor brain, and it is like it's really interesting and cool when you kind of actually think about it, but it's also like, how do I do that all the time?
That
Yes.
feeds directly into one of the prompts that Jeff and I came up with, which was when running or playing do you often find yourself thinking about how you'll edit it later?
100%.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
That's my
Yeah.
full stop answer. 100%. I'm like, I'm gonna have to cut this in editing.
Mhm.
You keep
Yeah.
talking, but it's gonna get cut.
I know that sometimes I'll do a speech or something as a, as another character, and then I'll get through it and I was like, holy shit, that was so rambly. Let me take that again, and then I'll do it again. Like, and I'll do a super short version. Or sometimes I do like an extended version for my players to make sure that they understand, because we're doing theater of the mind. But then
Yeah.
I'll re-record it right after, like, I'm gonna take that line again, guys. So just clean for the edit. I do that kind of thing, and I also will tell my players. We recorded just before this actually, and multiple times I was like, "Hey, can I get a clean one for the edit?" Doing
Mhm.
things like that. Um, eh, eh, yeah, nobody ever seems to mind that, but it does make
Mm-mm.
editing a lot easier rather than being like, I know I can edit together that like fragmented sentence, but it'll sound better and easier to edit if I just have you redo it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know for myself. Now obviously this doesn't happen now that we stream live on Twitch. You can't say, "Oh, let's do another take" when you're in a live video channel, you know. But when
Mhm.
it was still at the kitchen table, there were times when I would go to my play. No, it didn't happen very often. When it's like, "Can we do that again?" Usually it was because something had happened, something had rolled off a table, or there was some noise or some crash or something that had happened, you know. And I'm in my head going, "Fuck no, that's just going to be a nightmare. I can't clean that up." Especially because I don't know about the rest of ye, but I had a single Blue Yeti mic in the middle of a table between us all. So it's
Ooh.
a single audio file for everybody. It was an individual mic, so each person's audio is a separate source, you know, that you can then edit individually and combine into your final finished audio output. No, it was a single source for everything. So when you would have something like somebody has a fit of sneezing, or something falls off a table, or there's a crash, then in those instances there was, can we just redo that? And I think there might have been one or two times when players were just being, I'm going to say, a little bit inconsiderate and talking over each other too much, to the point where people couldn't hear each other. And I was like, look, guys, that's not clear. Let's redo this and give each other the space for the scene, you know? But thankfully, that didn't happen too many times. But at the same time, I do know that if I'd had 5 mics and each person's audio was a separate source, while on a technical level it would have made things a lot more complicated for me in terms of sheer editing of the audio, it would have made things a million times easier.
Yeah, well, I wanted to ask this actually, which kind of leans into this, but uh, so I use Zencaster to record, which is really nice because we're all remote. Like, we got 3 people in the same state, one person up north, a couple states away, and then one person in Wales. So we are scattered. We can't record in the same room. Uh, so Zencaster has been awesome. Hey, let me just plug that in right here. But it also cleans up the audio really nice. But one of my favorite things, and one of the reasons I leaned to that more than a lot of others, was so that I could have separate audio tracks for everybody, because
Yeah.
I did do a couple of recordings where I just had them, grouped together, but it's so much nicer to be able to be like, oh, somebody's leaning really close to their mic and you can just hear them breathing. And if it's all together, I can't take that out, like uh, I, I have misophonia as well, and that is like a nightmare for editing. So every
Mm.
little sound drives me nuts. Like,
Oh,
editing is a nightmare,
What
but
does that
it
mean?
is
I don't.
possible. Oh, sorry. Go on.
oh,
Misophonia.
misophonia is like it's almost that like nails on a chalkboard type sensation, where like certain sounds will just like trigger that response of like my back tenses up and I just like get a shitload of anxiety. Uh,
Okay.
so a lot of things like chewing and like certain tongue sounds that trigger that. Which has been like immersive therapy as far as editing goes. Like, I definitely have lightened up over
Wow.
the years. But yeah, sorry,
I,
you were going, Neil.
I know I was gonna say that, you're talking about breathing and all the rest of that. When I did first start, recording and editing for my podcast, I'm not a noisy eater, but every time I would eat a jelly, I could hear myself. And I'm not a heavy breather, but it seemed like I was trying to deep throat my mic when I was talking. I was like, oh my God. And I did actually do like physically doing things like moving my mic further away on the table, or, just little things like, or being more, because I have a naturally very loud voice. I've always had a naturally loud voice. And also, I'm a secondary school teacher. My day job, I'm teaching maths and science to teenagers. So I need a loud voice. But then when you, especially with me, where it's a singular crack from everybody around a table, if one person is significantly louder than everybody else, that's become super noticeable. So super noticeable then. So yeah, there was little things like covering my mouth, physically covering my mouth when I chewed. As I said, wasn't crisps, it wasn't noisy food, but for that Blue Yeti mic was picking up fecking everything. Moving back a little bit if I was going to yawn, because it's going to pick that up. And it was just, but yet again, it was something that I never, like, if you were talking with each other, we can be sitting down at the meal. You're not going to be thinking in your head, I want to punch this beast in the face because I can hear every single chew. But the mic is picking up every single tiny tone that everything is coming through. And I think that even more than the hating the sound of your own voice is what really is going to trigger a lot of people when they start editing.
Yeah, to play off of what Neil's talking about is like I am very lucky to have everybody that we can all record in person. I will never take that for granted. The only like the biggest problem, since we don't have like a large like studio, you know what I mean? Like we're in like my second bedroom in my apartment, and like where we got like the table, we have all the mics are all together. Is with the volumes that that's the everybody has, they'll get picked up on the other, and then there's like the echoing, and then when it comes to volumes, that if someone's talking lower for a certain point, so obviously you're increasing their decibels during the editing process, but then it picks up the echoing of what someone was doing at that time. So now I'm doing this battle of, do I keep the like the echoing of one thing to not, and then like that's where it gets that's the only part where I'd say like it gets like really messy when it comes to volumes. I'm constantly fluctuating it because of that situation.
Yeah, why can't we all just do this in a building with everybody in a individual, perfectly sound insulated room with a live video feed through our headphones so we can hear each other
Wouldn't that be
perfectly?
nice?
Like what?
Yeah.
Like I don't like why can't like surely like
And everybody
in a
has those super expensive shotgun mics.
yeah, as like I
Yeah.
mean like like when we burn down the capitalist Reich and we have our socialist utopia, like maybe it'll happen.
Absolutely.
So how does everybody record, by the way? I don't know if you want to go into equipment. Is this
Go for it.
I don't know. That's a really good question for people. I think people listening to this, I think like Zencaster. That's something that I guarantee you somebody when they listen back to this, be like, "Thank you so much. You've just saved my life."
Yeah.
So I use, as I say, we live stream now, so we're on Twitch. So my Blue Yeti mic is the mic that I am speaking into. Um, I've recently started. Now this is adjacent to the discussion. We used to use Google Meets for our video call, and the reason I did that is because Google Meets is a very good auto caption generation function, which meant I could have my captions live on my Twitch channel, which is really great. It's giving a layer of accessibility to my viewers, and even for people who don't need that, because of maybe some sort of a disability. Some people just love captions. I have recently moved to another video platform called Video Ninja, which is really great because it treats each person's video on the call as a separate source, which I then can put into OBS as a separate video source. There's separate audio tracks on the control panel, And if one person suddenly drops from the call, you don't have that thing that you get with Google Meets and Zoom where everybody suddenly moved around on the screen, you know? The only downside I have is that I'm a bit of a tech idiot and I still haven't figured out how to do auto caption generation. It is possible on Video Ninja, I just haven't figured it out yet. But I'm using a Blue Yeti mic. Simple, idiot-proof, USB, plug and play. I mean, yeah, those, you know, 4, 5, 6 plus €100 shotgun mics, like they're great and all, but I don't have what I'm doing doesn't justify that. My channel does not produce revenue for me, so you know, €100 Blue Yeti is doing the job great.
Jeff,
Yeah.
oh, what mic are you using?
Oh, I actually am using a Blue Yeti as well.
Okay, Riley.
I went through a big journey because when I very first started, I was like, I'm just gonna get the snowball, right? Like that's the blue snowball. It's a very cheap one, and it worked okay for what I was doing,
Mm.
learning. Because most podcasters, they don't get. I think the average is like you don't get past episode like 12 or something. Most people quit before they get to episode 12, which because it's a lot of work. So I started with that, and then I went to the Blue Yeti, and then I was still having some like background sounds that I didn't like, and I looked up stuff and switching to like an XLR system, so getting an interface,
Mm.
uh, and then so I got like a Shure interface, and then I had an SM58 from when I used to perform live doing music. And so I used that for a while. And then I was like, I've been podcasting for like
Mm.
3 years at this point. I might as well just like get the dream mic that I've always wanted. So I have the Shure SM7B, which I think it is amazing. And a lot of people, when I got it, started commenting on, "Whoa, what happened to your voice? It's so crisp, it's so clean." And I was like, but pretty much any like your Blue Yeti is going to be amazing, but and I think most XLRs and dynamic mics are going to bring you a whole nother level, but that's a lot more cost because you have to buy cables and
Yeah, yeah. That
interfaces
that
and
that
everything.
whole system is just like, but like that's the thing. Like the difference between a cheap €50 mic and a €100 mic is just, oh, it's unbelievable. And then when you
Absolutely.
get into the SLR system and that, it's like Hollywood shit. You know, you're like, oh, I'm a big fancy producer. You know, it's like,
Yeah. If we were making big money, I would buy all of my casts, these mics, and set them up with it. But
Mm,
that's so much money.
yeah.
I've got a Samsung Q2U that was recommended to me by the guy who taught me how to edit. So, all right, Psycho, how about you?
So once again, since I am lucky to have a group that can record in person, and like my our like page, our podcast, and everything like that, it's kind of is a whole group like partnership. We all chipped in for it's called a pod track by the company Zoom. They have like this like bundle where it's pretty much it's a mobile multi-track recorder, so we can record 6 different multi-tracks at the same time with a Bluetooth attachment on top of it to make it 7 collectively. And
Wow.
I'm able to watch the levels and everything like that, of everybody's volumes, gains, and everything like that consistently throughout the recording, and to see how long the recording is and everything. And it's like mobile, so we like it can run off batteries instead of having to be plugged in. We can literally set up a recording anywhere we want, and have
Does
up
it?
to 6 people.
Do you record separate tracks or does it all combine into one?
It does both.
Oh,
It
nice. Okay.
it gives
Nice.
yeah, it's filed with an SD card, and so what it does one track with all of them, and then it gives you there's a multi-track file that when I go in and I see it has like 1 through 6, and then the Bluetooth, and there's also a sound effect board on it as well that I can but
Cool.
it's really amazing. And like there was like it was just an entire package of that and 6 microphones as a bundle together that we got, and we've been using it since. And
I'm gonna ask the root question. How much was that?
um I think collectively we've had it for years.
Yeah, yeah.
I can probably find it on Amazon because that's where like I ordered it from. It's called the PodTrack 8. There's probably a PodTrack 9 now, but I think it was like a. Sorry, it wasn't. It was a lot cheaper than like we were initially like bundling out and expecting. So I think. Um.
Let's
Sorry.
see. Ari, why don't you look into that real quick? Ari, why don't you go ahead in the meantime?
Yeah. So I use a $50 microphone that I bought like 2 years ago. The brand is Mauno. I don't know if I'm saying that right. If I'm not, I'm sorry if your company happens to listen to this. It is not. It's not really fancy. It has a mic arm that I continually get my finger stuck in every single time I try to move it. Um, but I think that so I don't. I guess I don't necessarily think you need a super expensive mic. I mean, obviously, from an editing perspective, like one of us has a really souped up microphone and it makes editing so much like the leveling and mixing so much easier for me. But we record in Riverside. It captures the tracks separately and it has an amazing noise cancellation feature. We are not sponsored by them, but I do believe that they should sponsor us the way that I talk about them. And I really, really enjoy Riverside because everything is like it goes into the cloud, everything is saved on there. If someone loses internet, the rest of us still stay. It records locally on theirs as well. So there's been times where they were like, hey, you cut out, we couldn't hear you. And I'll obviously say it again, but when I go into the playback, the original line is there, which is usually what I wind up using because it's more feels more natural. So yeah, that's my answer.
Is there a big difference?
That's a lot like
I had my-
Zencaster.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Okay.
is there a big difference between the two that we know of, or
They're very they're very very similar in what they do. Like it's a great way to do remote hosting. Uh, I I had one problem, but this was years and years ago.
Don't you dare. No, I'm just kidding.
So yeah, exactly. Like I know that I've heard other podcasts record with them, but the one time for whatever reason somebody couldn't join our Zencaster link. We were having a guest on, and so we used Riverside, and the audio was significantly worse. But
Really?
that was years ago, and
Interesting.
I'm pretty sure they've cleaned like they've updated it a
Like,
lot
okay.
since then. Yeah,
Fair.
and even like Zencaster has improved over the years and stuff. And I have
Yeah.
a paid subscription for them now. So one of the nice things that
Same.
they do is with the export, you can do remove long pauses and remove filler words.
Oh,
So
nice.
Whoa,
takes
that's
out-
amazing.
That's
yeah,
awesome.
it takes out most uhs and ums and quite a bit of you can choose how long you want to silences to cut down to and from. So it's like any silence longer than 1.8 second or whatever, cut it down to 1.2 seconds, something like that. And it does that. So that's been a little bit of a lifesaver there. And I know that
Ooh,
Riverside
thunder.
has
Sorry.
things that are in very similar to that as well now. So
I don't
both
use
are very
any
good
of it.
options.
So,
Yeah.
so it's funny because I don't use any of those things. I just take them raw files and I throw them into Audition and I do everything there. I have a question for everyone, and I think that I'm going to be really. I don't know how I'm going to feel about the answer, but I
Okay.
would like to ask it because
be-
I think that I do. Go. Sorry.
Before you do that, do we have
Yeah.
a verdict on the pod track?
Yeah. So,
Oh, sorry.
The bundle. Now I'm recalling because I just looked it up. The bundle that's on Amazon is for the PodTrack and 4 microphones, and then we decided to buy 2 more on top of that. It was less than $1,000. It was close to $1,000.
Whoa,
but
that's
it was less.
incredible.
It was less than
But
$1,000.
Six
Um,
mics.
Yeah, with the 6
Yeah.
mics and the
Si-
PodTrack
and-
collectively,
Jesus,
and
that-
we've been using it for the past we've been using it for over 2 years now, and
That's
everything still
amazing.
works perfectly fine. And it was that between 4 of us, it was like a little bit less than 200. It was like 200 something bucks per person.
Mm.
So it's been a blessing. And then after I record, you could just plug the PodTrack directly to a laptop or a computer and transfer the files over just like that.
Nice.
It's
Well, if you're serious about podcasting and you've got about $1,000 to spend, there you go.
Yeah,
folks.
no, that sounds like an incredible investment.
yeah. It's
Well,
been,
when
it's
you
been
consider
awesome.
it's
Yeah.
everybody, right? 6 people
Yeah.
going in on it essentially. I
Mhm.
mean, the Yeti is $100, right? So
Yeah,
That's it.
exactly.
So just for six mics alone, you're talking €600. So like,
Right.
yeah.
yeah,
Um,
and like all the other stuff that stuff is like, I've seen other systems that do all the stuff you're describing that are a grand alone
Yeah.
without
Yeah.
getting a single mic. So that's unbelievable.
It's awesome.
Okay. Well, Ari, I believe you had a question.
Okay. So you all have your separate tracks when you're editing, right?
No.
Okay. Do so do you cut around all of the silence and the like dead space or background noises and then pull it all back together? I because I'm self-taught, I don't know the terms and I apologize. Um I might have to send you all like a picture at some point of like what it looks like when I'm in the editing process because I cut out anything that is not dialogue and then I pull it all back together.
Yeah, so
So
I
are
do something very similar. Like, unless somebody's talking, I try to just cut the track. It may be
Mhm.
silent, there may be background noise. I started doing that kind of more recently, of just like, because I found a way to shortcut it.
Okay.
And that's why I do that now. But also before I did that, I would occasionally hear something and I'd be like, Whose track did that?" Like, after it
Where did
came
it
out, I
come
would
from?
listen to it. Yeah, and I'd be like, "Whoa, no!" And I'd go back in and look at it and find it and fix it. And it's always so. I just figured like it's easier to just do that. But do you do it like first? Do you go in there and just like that's the first thing you do is go
Yep.
through, select all the silences, delete, and then go?
Yeah, so I'm
Oh,
actually gonna send you all a picture if I can find it because I just took one yesterday because I was trying to edit and my Discord was distracting me and I was like, hey, if you want this episode, you know. So this is what
yeah.
it looks like. I'm putting it in the roundtable chat.
Yep.
Um, and like we
Because
can
I
talk
just do it
about
as
this
I go.
later. I don't. So this is what it looks like during my first pass.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Ari, did you might want to check your program if it has an option for truncate silence.
Okay, because it'll
Uh,
auto cut it.
yes.
You see, I
I
could
was
be saving
doing
myself
I see.
17 hours.
yeah, that's what I was doing at first, and then I think I spoke with Benjamin Dury. I think he goes by Tabletop Benjamin on Twitter. He was the host of the Lawful Great Adventures podcast, but I think he was the one who was like, "Hey, have you heard of truncate silence?"
And so
Uh,
it just cuts out anything that is like complete silence.
yes, you can set it for whatever volume you want, and it goes through the entire track and edits
Ah,
everyone's voices together. That's basically like my first step is, or my editing process is I do a compressor first to get everyone's audio the same. I run a
yeah.
noise gate to get rid of little crunchies in the background, and then
Hmm.
truncate silence to just disappear any silence over like half a second.
Okay.
And like this last thing I recorded, it took a 3-hour session down to 2 by going through and editing that much silence out.
Oh my God. Oh, my mind is blown right now. You see,
Yeah.
this
It
is
is.
amazing.
Jeff told me this, and I was like looking
Okay.
through my Logic Pro and trying to find a way to do that. And I ended up just downloading Audacity, and that was literally all I used Audacity for. I
To
would
just
pull in
do
my
that
audio,
specifically.
yeah, put all the tracks in there, and then I would do the truncate silence. Now Zencaster does that for me, so I don't have to do that anymore. But it is such a big time saver. It's
I'll be
amazing.
looking
Yeah.
into it as soon as we get off of this thing.
I also have
Thank
so one
you.
of the first things that I did in Logic Pro X is there's another name for it in other programs, and I wish I remembered, but it's just cut and move. And so I can like
Mhm.
highlight a section, like Alt Delete. Is that what it is?
Ripple delete? You mean like when you
Ripple Delete. Yes, that's
Yes.
what it is. Ripple Delete. Yeah. So Ripple Delete is game changing. It's not called that on Logic Pro. It's just you have to actually go in and manually create a shortcut for move delete. And yeah, you highlight the area you want, do the ripple delete, move delete, whatever you want to call it, and it'll automatically take, you have this
Yeah.
audio here that's you're cutting, and it'll just move it automatically.
Oh my
It's
goodness! I
yeah,
knew I was gonna learn stuff
Yeah,
today.
and you guys
So-
are using the same thing, so
yeah. So it's called Ripple Delete on Adobe, and like the
Okay.
micro key is Alt and backspace. So if you highlight you can highlight all 4 tracks, everything that's highlighted, and you Alt backspace, it all ripples and then puts whatever.
Listen to me.
That's not
I feel like
highlighted
I
and
should
then
leave.
back
I
into-
shouldn't be on this anymore.
I will
no,
say
that's like tips and tricks for everybody. Everybody knows and
Yes.
learns different things.
I will say I've been doing it for a while. I ended up getting this mouse that you could put your own micros.
Yeah, like a
keys on
super
it.
mouse.
And so now I don't even have to like go to the keyboard. I'm just highlighting and using my thumb. So I edit a lot with just one hand now. And it's
Listen,
been,
when I blow up all of your DMs later, don't get mad at me, okay?
it's been a godsend because like I went from like on average my recording sessions, the editing amount of time, I'm probably doing double the amount of time. So if it's a 2-hour recording, I'm doing 4 hours. I will say that has cut that to where of me not having to like mess with like the micro keys, and I'm just doing with my thumb and highlighting and things like that, even like copy and paste.
Yeah.
I can do
so much
I can
faster.
like it would turn it into 3 hours instead of 4.
Oh my
Like, I cut- yeah, I
God.
cut-
This is
which-
It's
amazing.
significant.
That
Mm.
that kind of brings up a question just out of curiosity. Do you guys know like the average of how much you cut out per episode? Like if it was like a 3-hour recording, how much
About half.
About half?
Yep.
Yeah. I'm
Mhm.
probably like I think our average raw content is probably between 2.5 and 3 hours on like our solid episodes. And I try to always get in between the hour and a half to 2 hours when it comes to like a finished product.
Mm-hmm.
How about
Yeah,
go ahead.
I record for like we record on average 3 hours, and if there's combat in there, that'll
Mhm.
edit down to like an hour.
Mm.
Right.
Especially if it's combat heavy, right? But if it's a dialogue one, sometimes a 3-hour session might edit down to like an hour to an hour and a half for me. It just depends on the session.
Yeah, I was the same. So, like, we'd play for 2 hours, and when I would edit the audio for my podcast, I would split that 2 hours into 2 1-hour episodes because I personally feel that 60 minutes is the perfect length of a podcast episode.
Yes.
So I would so the way it would work is we'd play every Tuesday, but then the audio podcast would come out part 1 on Monday, part 2 on Wednesday. That was the way I did it, and I've always done it. So if it's 2-ish hours of audio recorded, I'm usually, if just cutting out pauses and filler words, that I could be taking easily 5 to 7 minutes out of the audio just from that. And then as you were saying, Riley, that like if it's combat, Jesus Christ, people take forever to count small numbers, and I don't care that I'm a maths
It gets
teacher. Okay,
harder. It gets
no,
harder
it
when
really.
there's
I'm
smaller
sorry.
numbers.
I'm
I
sorry.
swear.
I'm sorry. As somebody who teaches calculus for a living, I will tell you you're wrong. Okay,
No.
you have fingers. Use the goddamn things. Okay.
Listen, it's like my brain just shuts. Like
No.
sometimes I'm like, this is really, and I'm like, no, my brain is like, can't do this math right now.
I mean, don't get me wrong. This is where I go on my D&D rant. D&D mechanics are absolutely god awful. It's some of the shittest mechanics I've ever seen in a TTRPG, and it's so stupidly and unnecessarily complicated for a TTRPG system. So I totally respect people getting confused because they literally don't know shit. What number am I supposed to add here? Is this an attack roll, an ability check, or a saving throw? That's fair enough. But
No,
yeah,
I meant regular math.
yeah, when it comes to when it comes to combat and you're literally just waiting for somebody to add their dice roll to a 5, you suddenly 20, sometimes really 30% of the audio is gone. It's crazy.
Yeah. I would also
Just
say
doing
thinking. I know that they're
Oh, God.
engaged, right? And that they're listening to other people and their attacks and stuff, but I'm like, why aren't you thinking about your turn a little bit during that time? Because then we
Oh.
get to you and you're like, I have not given this a single thought on what I'm going to do.
No, when I'm running combat, it is your turn. Player X, you are on deck. Player
nice.
Y,
Maybe I should
you
start
are
doing
after
that.
player. Yeah, no, it's always when I'm running combat. this is the player's turn. Now, my players will usually have wrote the initiative order down, so they know, and which is really great when I accidentally skip somebody. Like, oh no, geez, thanks guys, okay, because for me, it's like as the GM, you are controlling so many things, and my game, it's set in a alternate 19th century Earth full of creatures from folklore, so it's an extremely high magic game. The creatures that my players are fighting are fairies and goblins from European folklore as they were described in their folklore, meaning they're terrifyingly godlike in their abilities and powers, meaning that I could have a creature, a lovely diminutive, 1 meter tall goblin that might have 20 different spells. I'm choosing which one I'm going to use in a single. So but that simple thing of, but it is a bugbear. Then I've had one or two players who are just, even when they're warned and it gets to their turn and they spend 3 minutes deciding, it's like, it's like, seriously, you're a fighter, hit them with the fucking sword and stop thinking about it.
Yeah, that's the funny part, is that 90% of the time they're gonna do their normal thing, right? Like,
Yes, exactly.
you know what you're doing. But I literally wrote down the on deck, use on deck for combat. I'm gonna start doing that.
How often do you guys have to reset the scene for when it's someone's turn? Of them being like, okay, so what's going on? Like who's where? Where's what's going on? Like, I don't know how many times, like, in the same battle, in the same round, that I'm doing it. Like,
Yeah, it's
I
like almost
can't-
everybody's turn.
I can't. I am. I'm going to shout out my two amazing cast members right now, Dusty and Wayra. We have. I don't know what it is. We zip through combats. Like, sometimes I'll look at a combat and I'm like, this thing took 30 minutes, and it's. I mean, maybe when I edit it down, and I'm like, and it's really engaging and it's really interesting. We also do. We talked about it a lot, about thinking about, like, whenever we have spells, what do they look like in our spare time, so that when we come to the table and we might have to change something, or like, even Wayra plays a barbarian, so that's just like swinging the scythe. They have a ton of, like, different ways that they have, like, on deck, essentially, to describe how they're going to maneuver the scythe in the combat, because obviously for this type of medium, we don't want people to just say, hey, I swung my sword or I shot this spell. We want it to be descriptive, but that requires us to kind of think about it beforehand and have things, like, I have some of mine typed out, but that's a whole nother level of, like, nerdiness, I guess. So I don't know.
One of the best advice that I've seen about podcast editing was the best thing you can do to improve your edit and editing time is prep, or
Yeah.
like doing things to impact the actual recording, because then you don't ever have to edit that down. You don't have to edit that
Yep.
out if everybody's prepared
That
for
is
it
true.
properly.
You know what else is helpful? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say something that we've started doing. So again, I'm lucky that I do the audio, like the voice editing and pulling the story together. Dusty does the music. So I kind of pass it off to them. But once I do my second pass, I put it in the drive, and the two of them listen to it for edits, and then they come back to me with notes. If we have to, like, catch any lines or rescript anything. Since we started doing that, there's a lot more presence in the moment, because they understand what it sounds like behind the scenes before they get the final product. So they go, wait, do that again. Or our little catchphrase that we have is like, can you say that like we're on a podcast? So at any given moment, if someone says that, that means we need to zip it up and get back in, our heads in the game. So
I think
yeah.
we've probably all had that moment of when you're in the middle of play and somebody does something or there's some reaction, and for our podcast listeners, the expression, whatever crazy shit does happen or whatever filthy expression came across a player's face. But actually, Ari, just because you just mentioned music here, can I ask everybody, because I am a basic ass bitch, I do not add music, I do not add sound effects, but for you amazing professionals, where do you get your music? Where do you get your sound effects from?
Music, my main two sources are Nihilore, which makes copyright free music, as long as you give them credit, and then I use Pixabay, because they also have just a huge library of copyright free sound effects and music to pull from.
Nice.
I use what do I use? Well, for music, we were doing our own music for a little while. Kyle is an amazing musician. Their sibling is amazing too. So we had some custom songs. But eventually I needed some like, oh, I need this type of music and humble bundles, those types of things.
Yeah.
They had some for like Ovani Sound, and they'll do bundles on there. Like right now, I think there's a $20 one, and you get like 40 different like packages in there, and there'll be certain things like some of them are just moods, like fantasy music, and some of them are Foley, so just like steps or moving through bushes, or
Mm.
like
Right.
one of them's just like guns or magic, or even diving even deeper into just like air magic specifically, earth magic specifically. So I use a lot of Ovani Sound now for both my sound effects and music.
Not to step
Yeah.
in really quick. Funny enough, as we're talking about this, a friend of mine just sent me a link that I will share with all of us in the side chat here of a game audio bundle from sonus.com of 30 gigabytes of sound of license free, copyright free, no attribution required stuff that you can use.
Mm.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And that's same with Ovani. Is like I don't have to credit them or anything. Like they make a lot of those sound effects for video games. So those bundles also include like plugins for Unreal Engine or what. I'm not a video game maker, so I don't really know what those are, but yeah, it's really cool.
Um,
Look at that.
me and my group, because we want like the podcast is almost like our baseline for how we start. Because we're also trying to do videos. We're always trying to do a bunch of different stuff. When it just comes to content creation, we have a subscription to Epidemic, which Epidemic
Same.
is, thousands of sound effects and songs. Like we also made sure to get custom songs made. Like our theme song is custom made, and then some of like the main music is custom made. But then the rest of the stuff we go get our sound effects and background music from Epidemic.
Yeah, we use Epidemic Sound. And our theme song is custom made as well by my amazing friend SG, who did a wonderful job. And they probably will never hear this, but I'm sending you love, and that's it.
Very cool.
I just remembered. It's a really funny one when Jesus, 3.5, 4 years. No, whenever it was over 3 years ago when I first started recording and uploading it for my podcast. I did record myself, a stock piece of audio of "Hello, my name is Neil Byrne, Fair Folklore," and then, that was the intro that I put at the start. And when I was recording it, I think I was in my parents' living room or something. I can't remember where I was, just some random place. But there was a crazy ass storm outside, and the mic picked up the noise of the wind from the storm. So in my little intro audio, and you have me trying to sound all cool and dark and mysterious with my world of folklore and fairy tales, in the very background there's this faint sound of this crazy gale wind. That is like, yeah, that wasn't bundles and free downloads. That was literally what was outside the window at the time that got picked up by my Blue Yeti mic. And I was like, shit, I couldn't have edited this in if I'd wanted to. This is bloody perfect.
Nice. Anybody ever have those any of those like sort of kismet moments that you can think of?
For the editing purposes of it,
Yeah.
um,
Here's the thunder. I don't know if you heard it.
We've had like somebody say a cat meow or something, and then a cat does meow,
Ooh.
something like that. Like those little maybe moments like that. And so I like, oh, I don't need to edit that in. Or there was an episode there was like lots of cats in them, and there was a couple of silences where different people's cats meowed, and so I was able to just like cut those out and use those as sound effects throughout.
Yeah, that's
But
cool.
I don't know.
I
mean,
Go ahead.
I have had the thing, like the obvious one, because I live in fucking Ireland, of like, my players ask me, "What's the weather like?" and it suddenly is pouring outside, and that's getting picked up. It's like, it's raining today. It's a really horrible day. It's raining. Because you ever notice why it's never raining in TTRPGs? The weather's always fine. Like,
Yeah.
We just had a
unless,
raining episode, actually. I'm
yeah, like,
obsessed with weather in TTRPG
yeah,
campaigns.
the weather's always lovely unless the GM has planned combat involving some monster that appears out of a fog or a mist. The weather's always lovely. As like, yeah,
I think that
Mis-
might be a problem from living in Seattle. That my weather and podcast or in my home games is like it's always gray.
yeah.
Like it's always wet. It's always gray
Mhm.
out until it's a special day and then it's sunny. And usually a player's like something bad's going to happen.
I can think of with when noises or certain things happened and it created just funny moments. As in, so I live in like a sub level, and there sometimes like deer or like squirrels like click and like tick on like our windows, and one of the players, Chappie, he gets like super hyper focused whenever they show up, and it always ends up us having to stop, and he's like almost like trying to fight the deer like through the window, and it makes it really funny.
Nice.
That's awesome.
So how about the opposite? Have you ever had like a perfect storm of nonsense occur that just had to be cut out, like something that like is funny out of context?
My dog really likes to bark when we start playing because she knows the voices of all the people because she's met them. And
Yep.
so she often will be like, where are they? Why am I not getting treats or biscuits or pets?
Mm.
And so she'll start barking to like, hey, John, answer me. So we always have to stop and like, it's going to bark for a while. Um, but yeah, that's the one I have.
Okay.
One thing
We
that,
have an
sorry, Ari, you go ahead.
no, just real quick, we have an ongoing joke since I had to move my desk when I got my new computer. It's by the window that's on kind of a busier street. So there's constantly cars going by, and it's just something that we've gotten used to. Like, I'll stop talking for and then we'll hear the car and we'll wait. But there's this ongoing joke now that I have a 1969 Chevy Impala that I'm constantly fixing. Someone's always driving it, and it's in like all of our bloopers, but it happens at least like once an episode at this point. So
Yeah, it's funny. It's this not something that has happened and I've had to edit out, but something that I genuinely was always waiting to happen and never did. And it's really weird and random because, as I said, my mic would pick up me silently chewing a gummy bear. But I've got a big, like 32-kilo husky cross at home. Okay, she's an absolute sweetheart, very demanding of pettings and all the rest of that. But when we would be playing around our kitchen table and she would be down there because that's where the people are and she's hoping for treats, eventually, when people stopped treating her and petting her, she would fall asleep. And quite often, she would then have sleep woofs as she's dreaming of chasing rabbits and squirrels. And as I said, she's a 30 plus kilo husky, so she's a big ass dog. And I don't know how, but my bloody mic, which would pick up me yawning, never once picked up the audio of this large animal 2 meters from the feckin' mic whimpering as her legs are twitching as she's chasing a bloody rabbit. And it's like, how did that not happen? Gummy bears it picks up. The dog, no.
Before I had this mic, we live by an airport, and we
Oh
would
God.
get low flying planes all the time. Like
Oh.
we literally, the house will shake sometimes. Helicopters going by, and it would pick up like every mic I had up until this mic picked up airplane sounds. And so I used to have to always wait, and then they would be doing like passes sometimes or circling, and so it would be like I'd have maybe 15 seconds of silence where I could, hurry, gotta try and get this part in. Absolute mess. I hated it. But when I switched to this mic, thankfully, it doesn't pick up that background noise anymore.
Cool. All right. Well, folks, I think we're coming towards the end here. We usually go for about an hour and a half for these. So I've got one more question for each person to answer. and it is this: what's the biggest lesson you've learned since starting this journey with actual editing your actual play? So let's start with Neil this time, and then we'll go back around the other way.
The biggest lesson for me was realizing my voice does not actually sound as stupid as I think it is.
Good lesson. Good lesson. All right, Ariana.
It is so much more work than I ever could have imagined. I don't think that people, it's one of those things where you don't know until you're actually in it and doing it. Um, but I also discovered a hobby and a love for something that I never would have known that I had I not been like, I think I want to start a podcast. I'm just going to learn how to do this. So yeah.
Yep, I totally get the idea of like just jumping into something and kind of making it up as you go along. That's my default state when it comes to a new
Yeah.
project. All right.
Figure it out.
Yeah, just do it. Just
Mhm.
try. Yeah, trial and error. All right, Psycho. How about you?
I would say the biggest lesson I learned is that your eyes are just as important as your ears when it comes to audio editing
Ooh.
because of like wavelengths
Yep.
and decibels, and because I remember in my first few episodes everything sounded fine, and then after it gets exported to like an MP3 or whatever it is, certain things are a lot lower than what I recall hearing in my headphones than like when it comes out, and that's because I've learned to pay attention to the noise and the wavelengths to see how like short they are, how tall they are. Even though it sounds okay, you also have to like match it up with that. Is that matching it up with the rest of the other volumes that isn't actually okay?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, Riley.
Had myself muted. Sorry. I think maybe for me, I wish that I had spent more time at the very beginning looking up YouTube shortcuts. Though you're getting familiar with the system by yourself, right? Like I was self-taught as well, and at a certain point, I just had so much on my plate that I was like, how can I speed up this editing process? And so I started Googling, and I would watch YouTube videos, just search like forums and find all these shortcuts. So like now I edit at 2x speed. And at least for the first edit, I do that. And then sometimes I'll be like, oh, how's that going to sound normal? And I created a shortcut so that I can change my speed, my Vera speed, so I can listen at 2x or normal. Creating a shortcut for the ripple on Logic Pro, but learning those shortcuts and learning different types of things of like, oh, how can I? Jeff taught me some stuff about EQ, and if I arrange my EQ, if I adjust my EQ to a certain pattern, whatever it is, I don't know what you call it, self-taught, right? Then that'll
Yes.
eliminate some of this hissing that's coming in. Things like that. It's just like look up on YouTube, look up on Google, uh, and talk to other podcasters and learn from them because everybody has so much more insight and different insight than you. Like we all know different things. Like earlier, Ari learned about the ripple, and
I know. I take it back. That's actually the biggest thing I learned. I take back what I said before.
yeah, that's honestly probably my biggest thing. Like biggest time saver is that ripple.
Yeah.
It's so good.
My mind
It's
is blown.
amazing. Same with truncate silence. So
Mhm.
use
Um,
those.
Real quick, just because when we were talking about the pod track, one thing I forgot to say about it is that it does its own compression and de-essing through
Ooh.
the
Oh my
recording as
God.
well. Yeah, it's a really
Everyone
good.
went,
It's a really good piece
"Ooh."
of equipment.
Oh man.
Jesus Christ.
Amazing.
There's other programs too that like you can get Levelator and that you can put like just a track in there and it'll try and auto adjust it. It does a decent job. Like if you have separate tracks, you just run each of them through it. Or when you have the finished track, before you add the music, run it through Levelator and it tries to adjust those. But then after you run it through that, you're going to start hearing more breath sounds because you've brought up that volume or more background sounds, just like, Psycho was talking about earlier. So, but that's again going back to the Googling and YouTubing things of finding out like what other people have used to help solve problems you're running into.
Yep. Okay, and Jeff, how about you? Thing you've learned the most?
Oh, geez. I mean, all of it's just been, what is that?
Real easy and natural for you. You've learned nothing. You
Super
started out a
simple,
pro.
like a baby born to it.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed speaking with everybody else who's also self-taught because I feel that fun thing of all of us kind of showing each other our Lego castles.
Validated.
And they were like, "Oh, sweet, you have that thingamajiggy." You're like, "Yeah, but I call my thingamajiggy ripple delete. What do you call it?" I call it move delete. And it's like, "Oh, neat. Now we have new terms for all these things that I'm sure a professional person hearing us like, oh my goodness, how do these people actually
Oh
put
yeah.
stuff out?"
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, you know what's fun? Wait till they actually hear how good we sound. You know.
Yeah.
um, yeah, I think the whole trip, podcasting and audio editing, running an actual play has been just a lot of fun. And now that I've been doing it for about a year, it kind of just like, oh man, this just kind of feels normal now. Like this is just a fun thing to do. It's a fun project.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, so the last thing we're going to do before we cut is, of course, time to shout out your project or projects. So we're going to go reverse order this time. So, Jeff, you go ahead.
Yeah, I'm I'm the GM of the Big Campaign Stories podcast. You can find us pretty much everywhere. Um, Twitter, Threads, blah blah blah.
Okay. Riley.
I'm Riley. I am the BM, which stands for Bunker Master, not Bowel Movement, though it is debatable.
Disputed.
For for Friend and Foe Adventure Co., which is a Borderlands Bunkers and Badasses TTRPG. So it's kind of like based on that video game series. Very wild, very rowdy. We have a lot of fun. There's a lot of comedy, and then we also have really dark moments and moments that may make you cry or not. You know, if you're a psychopath, whatever, or a sociopath, either one. And you can find and listen to Friend and Foe Adventure Co. Pretty much wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. And you can find us on social medias. Most of them, I think we're most active on X at FF Adventure Co.
Okay, Psycho.
Yes, I'm Psycho. I am the DM for the Clash of Crits podcast. It's Clash of Crits, spelled crits with a K. And you can listen to us on pretty much any kind of streaming platform and YouTube. And we even have our own videos, and we do all different kinds of things. And same thing on social media, Clash of Crits, crits with a K.
Ari.
I am Ariana or Ari. You can find me at Rainbow Dice Club on most of the socials. Our podcast is actually called Tales of Three. Sorry, and we are an all queer, narrative driven D&D audio drama podcast where the three players all share the role of game master. So it's different than what your regular D&D would be, but we have a lot of fun. And yeah, come find us.
All right, and Neil.
Hey folks, I'm Neil. I am the creator of Faearth. It's an indie TTRPG set in an alternate 19th century Earth where all the creatures from folklore and fairy tale are real, have always been real, and lived openly alongside humanity. You can find me pretty much everywhere at Faearth, Twitter, Blue Sky. I even have a TikTok where I feel very out of place because I am a 43-year-old man surrounded by Gen Z. So, and we have our podcast for our first campaign can be found Spotify or in other places, and some of campaign 2 as well there. But we also have our Twitch that streams live on Tuesdays at 9 o'clock Central European. But I also have all the VODs on my YouTube channel, and the game itself, I had a Kickstarter earlier this year. The final core rulebook will be published and out hopefully by the end of next year. And if you jump onto my itch.io page, you can find an early release version of my core rulebook, a starter adventure with pre-gen characters you can immediately start, a bunch of one-shots, and loads of other stuff as well.
Very cool. And all of that stuff is going to be in the show notes. I have been your host. Go by Sizer or Dread Pirate Sizer online. You can look me up on Twitter at Skies of Fortune. That is my own indie dev project. We are the Sky Pirate RPG. We have both airship and party scale combat systems in our game. Currently in beta, we are testing on the server. Come find us. Anyway, thank you for tuning in today. This has been Around the Table, and we'll see you for the next one. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye. Bye. Bye.
Yay.